The Chicago White Sox destroyed the Cincinnati Reds on Sunday. The game was essentially over after the second inning. White Sox piled it on 17 runs, and they saw big games from Hanser Alberto and Andrew Vaughn. The Sox have now won back-to-back series and head to Pedro Grifol's old stomping ground to take on the last-place Royals. Dylan Cease is on the mound for the Sox as the Southsiders try to keep things rolling in Kansas City.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Sox fans, welcome back to Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Sox. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search Locked On White Sox. Hey, I'm your host, Nick Morawski, a lifelong diehard Chicago White Sox fan, recording this podcast just blocks from the ballpark in beautiful Bridgeport. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Locked On White Sox is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The White Sox visit the Kansas City Royals on Monday. Dylan Cease on the hill for the Sox. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with Sirius XM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. How about our White Sox? They are now 12-23. The Sox have won 5 of their last 7 games and have won back-to-back series. Not a bad past week, actually, for the White Sox between Minnesota and Cincinnati. Hopefully, more good baseball in Kansas City. Going to talk about that later in the episode. The weekend was a bit spoiled, though, with the Eloy Jimenez news. Had a appendectomy, I believe, on Saturday night officially. It just seems like there's a rain cloud that has been following the Chicago White Sox for the last couple of seasons. Nothing that Eloy Jimenez can do. I mean, he needed to have his appendix out. But gosh, the last person that you really wanted to see go down for 4 to 6 weeks. I mean, he has been on a tear recently. The Sox just have to rally, and they did on Sunday. Get into the details a little bit. Sox, of course, lived by the home run on Friday, first game of the Cincinnati series. Tried to do that on Saturday. It didn't work out. And then on Sunday, just exploded in all kinds of ways. We'll talk Kopech as well. I don't know if he had some issues maybe pitching with a big lead, but gave up 4 solo home runs, which was not ideal. But of course, Sox, 18 hits, 17 runs, so it didn't really matter, but still something to pay attention to. I was yelling at the TV, especially, after the second inning, or maybe even during the second inning. Hey, save some of those runs for tomorrow in Kansas City. I mean, if you've been following the Sox for a while, or even maybe just for a few years, you have noticed a pattern. When the Sox, when they do pile it on double-digit runs and they just explode, the next game, it's amazing. It happens. They'll score 1 or 2 runs, and you'll say, what? How did they score 17 runs just yesterday? And it's pretty much the same lineup. How does that happen? It's just the weirdest thing with the White Sox. I wonder if it happens with other teams in the MLB. So hopefully that's not the case. But I'm telling you, if they score 1 or 2 runs on Monday with Cease on the hill in Kansas City, I will not be surprised. That has been the White Sox way. But we'll stay focused on Sunday and all the good that happened this past weekend. Sox definitely flexed the power. Hey, Sox had their garage sale this past weekend. It was on Saturday at Sox Park. Always a fun event. Shout out to Chris and his family. Loyal Locked On White Sox listeners, got to talk to them before the garage sale opened. Just awesome talking White Sox. Really appreciate the continued listenership, especially during this season. But fun to meet listeners, talk White Sox baseball, in person, and just everything that's been going on with this team. And, saw, a pretty good series in Minnesota. They should have swept, but I was hoping for at least a series win, and we got it in Cincinnati. Again, Cincinnati, was 5 games under coming into the series with the Sox. They were probably looking at our White Sox like, okay, here we go. Should be an easy weekend. So I'm glad the Sox went in there and took the series. It's, you're not going to win every single game, but if they're going to try to claw their way out of this hole that they dug themselves, you just got to win series. And now they've got to stay focused, put Sunday behind them, and stay focused on Monday. And hopefully Pedro Grifol will be able to do that. Interesting article from Bob Nightingale. Always interesting when he starts writing about the White Sox for USA Today. And sometimes it just feels like, he is a White Sox whisperer. He is getting information from Jerry Reinsdorf, from the front office of this is what the message is that we want to send out. You go ahead and put it in an article. So the title of the article on Sunday, Can MLB's Most Disappointing Teams Turn Things Around? And he kind of started off a little bit with maybe tongue-in-cheek, a bit of a joke, but there's some seriousness to it. And Nightingale wrote, isn't it time for, to fire rookie manager Pedro Grifol and bring back Ozzie Guillen in Chicago? So, look, ever since Robin Ventura got the job, when the White Sox are scuffling and they're playing poor and they're going through just a horrible stretch, they're having like what's been going on with the Sox this season, there is always been a call for Ozzie Guillen. We need Ozzie Guillen back. He's going to light a fire. We need his passion. And I honestly, I really thought it was going to be Ozzie Guillen as the next manager back this past fall. The fact that, Rick Hahn seemed to be given permission to find the manager, that made things a little different then. And like, okay, I doubt it's going to be Guillen, but it felt like it there for a little while. And I think the calls for Ozzie Guillen, which I totally understand. I mean, look, if Ozzie Guillen's manager right now, it's at least going to be probably more entertaining than what we've got going on right now. But would that be the right move? Look, probably not. But the call for Ozzie Guillen is never going to go away while Ozzie Guillen is a presence and he is around. I mean, he is on, of course, NBC Sports Chicago pre and post, speaking his mind, and on the Score 670 at least once a week, maybe a couple times a week. He was just recently on AJ Pierzynski's Foul Territory. I mean, he is around. He is a presence. Players hear what he has to say. And so I just thought that was kind of interesting by Nightingale. Is that something that, the front office and Jerry has in mind if things continue to go down this way? I doubt it. But again, there's always going to be a call for Guillen when you've got something like, 12-23 right now for the Sox. Nightingale continued to write, if you're a Cardinals, White Sox, Yankees, Phillies, or Mets fan, or any other underachieving team, a poster of the 2019 Washington Nationals team should be hanging in your clubhouse wall. This is a team that was 19-31 and sitting 10 games out of first place in the NL East on May 24th, 2019. The secret, don't panic. You have to understand the process, understand what you're trying to do, and stay positive. Washington Nationals manager Dave Martinez said, and things will turn around in 2019. That was my focus with the coaches, with the players. I was fired up. Hey, keep playing hard, keep staying positive, and don't worry about the wins and losses. Everything will even themselves out. You just go, stay in the fight. You never know what's going to happen. Now, some of Pedro Grifol's post-game comments have had that type of theme. We have to keep playing. It's not like we're going to stop playing. We had a rough stretch. Teams go through this. It's unfortunate that it happened at the beginning of the season. But we just have to keep staying positive, keep our focus. So I've heard that kind of statement from Grifol. Bob Nightingale continued, though. The White Sox have the Bermuda Triangle of lousy hitting, awful pitching, and horrendous defense. The White Sox, believing that last year was just an aberration, are playing in the weakest division in the American League. So You can go out there and be positive and stay focused, but you have to be playing good, solid baseball. Your starting pitching has to step up. Your bullpen has to step up. You can't live just by the home run. You have to have situational hitting, and you got to do the little stuff, the fundamentals, the stuff you should have been doing since high school. So Nightingale had some predictions, kind of, as he tends to do in his articles. And he wrote, if the Texas Rangers can wait, they could pick up veterans Joe Kelly or Kendall Graveman if the Chicago White Sox are out of the race by July. The White Sox, this is what he wrote, the White Sox don't plan to keep starter Lucas Giolito after this season and will make him available at the trade deadline if they are out of the race. And that is not that's not a big surprise. It's sad news. We've been following his career for a long time now, but not a surprise. I mean, when was the last time the Chicago White Sox gave a contract extension to one of their starters that had been kind of in the rotation for several years? John Danks, late 2011 going into the 2012 season. I mean, just think about all the different arms that we've had that have either been traded or, given up on, or they didn't extend their contract. They let those pitchers walk. The Sox do not pay for, their hometown pitching, and they don't go out and they don't spend big money during free agency on pitching. They just don't. I mean, you've seen the White Sox give contract extensions to Yohan Moncada, Eloy Jimenez, Luis Robert, I think before he even played an actual game, Tim Anderson very early in his career, but not with pitchers. Absolutely not. So I hate to say it, but, I agree. I think Lucas Giolito, they try to get something for him. I don't know what you're going to get, but they try to get something for Lucas Giolito, especially, if things are going downhill by the trade deadline. Now, even if the White Sox somehow figure it out and they win the division and they have a successful season, even if, I still think Lucas Giolito walks. The Sox just do not have a track record of, re-signing or bringing in starting pitching. So unfortunate, but that's what it is. However, though, Nightingale wrote, the White Sox certainly plan to pick up the $15 million option on closer Liam Hendriks in 2024, considering the buyout is also $15 million. So in terms of bullpen and relief pitchers, the White Sox spend money. Okay. They've got one of the most expensive bullpens in all of baseball. So that's weird. The Sox do spend money on relievers, which sometimes you can kind of just find and figure out. But starting pitching, they will not spend money on that. Liam Hendriks, speaking of Liam Hendriks, he has thrown for the Charlotte Knights recently. A couple outings, have done pretty well. So keeping tabs on him. That is just an amazing story. Great to hear. Again, Eloy Jimenez, hopefully the recovery process goes well for him. They're saying 4 to 6 weeks on that appendectomy. That would put it around June 3rd to June 17th, if you look at that 4 to 6 week timeline. Now, the All-Star break is July 10th. Trade deadline August 1st. So when it comes to what Nightingale was saying, if the Sox are out of it and way back in the division by July, they might try to make some deals. But I honestly, I think it would be after the All-Star break, and they might even want to wait up until the trade deadline if they're really looking for maximum value. Jimenez, again, just the hottest hitter so far with the White Sox. Last 7 games, slashing .464, .516, .714, couple home runs, and 8 RBI. So hopefully a speedy recovery for Eloy Jimenez. White Sox definitely flexed their power this past weekend, hitting multiple home runs in each of the 3 games. Tough news again for Jimenez, but another series win for our White Sox. More on that in a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. The Chicago White Sox play the Kansas City Royals on Monday. Dylan Cease on the hill. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with Sirius XM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. Hey, let's start with Sunday. That was a feel-good game. Sox destroyed the Reds 17-4. Now, Cincinnati was winning 1-0. Very early in the game, which is kind of funny thinking back on that. Sox scored a ton of runs early, 11 runs in the second inning alone. Most since I think I saw 2007, if that's right. Andrew Vaughn had a triple and double before the third inning. Again, a triple for Andrew Vaughn. Home runs, Alberto and Sheets. Alberto had a couple doubles as well. Sox offense, 17 runs, 18 hits, 7 extra base hits, 8 for 13 with runners in scoring position. They walked 4 times, which is kind of impressive, and 7 strikeouts. Alberto, 4 for 4, a couple doubles and a home run, 4 RBIs for Hanser Alberto. Vaughn, 3 for 5, home run short of the cycle. Zavala, the only starter to not get a hit. So the first game without Eloy, well, I guess the second game without Eloy Jimenez, but the first game after kind of the big news, it just seemed like Saturday's game, there's something was going on. Obviously, could have been affected by the news of Eloy Jimenez, but Sunday, that was a great response. Losing such a spark plug to the offense, and they came out and they did that. That was great to see. Now, Michael Kopech was your starter on Sunday. He went 6 innings, 8 hits, 4 earned runs, 1 walk, only 2 strikeouts, gave up 4 solo home runs. His ERA now at 5.97. Now, again, it's buried. That right there is buried because the Sox had 17 runs and they won the series. But it's kind of weird pitching with a massive lead. And it was early. I mean, the Sox were up like 11-1 after the second inning. And you sometimes lose focus. I'm wondering if that was an issue for Michael Kopech, where, I've got this massive lead. I can kind of I don't have to be so fine. I can maybe get a little experimental. If I miss, more in the zone, I might just start throwing fastballs. That might have happened, and they just kind of teed off for those 4 solo home runs. So I'm not too concerned about that. I'm wondering if it was a closer game, if there would have been a different game plan from him and Zavala behind the plate. But something to kind of keep an eye on. I'll have to go back and listen to some of his comments that he made post game, where his mind was at. Bullpen, though, Middleton, man, solid again. Last 3 outings for Middleton, 2 2/3 innings, 0 hits, a walk, and 5 strikeouts. So it's good to see him emerge as a reliable arm. On Saturday, that was the loss. Sox fell to the Reds 5-3. Look, ball goes far, team goes far. You've heard that saying quite a bit. It happened on Friday, but you can't live by the home run alone. They tried to on Saturday. Alberto and Zavala had home runs. Zavala finally broke out of a funk. He had a no-doubter. And then you had the Eloy Jimenez appendectomy news, the 4 to 6 recovery time. And this is what Grifol had to say. Eloy is our 4-hole hitter. He was swinging the bat really well. Robert now is swinging the bat really well. Today was his 4th straight game with an extra base hit, and that ties a career high for him. So being able to have those 2 guys swinging the bat at the same time with a couple of other guys, and Moncada doing a rehab stint, which he hit a home run on Sunday with the Charlotte Knights. It was promising, but that's life. There's stuff you've got to deal with, and we've got to move on. Thank God everything came out all right. So exactly, you got to move on. And this is the kind of the thing we've been saying over the last couple seasons when Robert has gone down, or TA, or Jimenez, Moncada. Like, you just got to keep moving. I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing that they're playing Kansas City. Hopefully they don't sleep on a last place Kansas City team. They're tough to play. They've been very tough on the White Sox. But on Saturday, White Sox offense, 3 runs, 8 hits, 6 strikeouts, a couple walks. Sox were 1 for 8 with runners in scoring position. Again, it's good to have those home runs, but you got to execute when you have the opportunity. Again, this is what Pedro Grifol said after that Thursday loss to the Twins, where the Sox were 1 for 16 with runners in scoring position. It's not frustrating for me. The right guys were at the plate. It was just one of those days. They had a good approach. They took good swings. It just didn't happen. Hitting's tough. I will always refer to that quote. I'm sorry. I thought that was such a goofy quote from Pedro Grifol. Like, what are you watching? Thankfully, whatever happened on Saturday, they cleared that up, obviously, on Sunday. Clevenger was your pitcher on Saturday, 6 innings. He gave up 4 earned runs, a walk, 7 strikeouts, gave up 1 home run, and it was a biggie. Really the nail in the coffin for the Sox. His ERA sub-5, 4.84. He threw 97 pitches on Saturday. Santos and Colome came in for the bullpen on Saturday. Each pitched an inning. Santos gave up a run on 2 hits. Friday kicked the weekend off in a nice way. Sox won a tight one, 5-4. Hunter Green was on the mound for Cincy. Man, he had some swing and miss stuff. He's got some high velocity. Tough guy to face. 4th inning, Reds were up by 1. And then back-to-back singles, runner on the corner, nobody out. 3rd single in a row, it was 2-0. And then 4th single, 3-0. So the Reds were piling on early. 5th, Sox came storming back. Elvis Andrus, thank you. A 3-run home run, first of the year. He really let Alberto off the hook, who just couldn't get it done earlier in the inning. Bottom of 5, Jonathan India, man, he can play. He did some damage against the Sox this past weekend. He had a solo home run to dead center, and it was off a cement mixer by Lance Lynn. Cement mixer, just a cutter that just didn't do anything. It just spun in a circle like the back of a cement mixer, and it was 4-3. Then Eloy Jimenez with a hit, and then Robert with a bomb off of a 100-mile-per-hour fastball. It was 5-4 Sox at that point. Lynn started the bottom of the 7th. His pitch count was in the high 90s. There was an error by Yaz with 2 outs. Thought Yaz might have hurt himself swinging in the 9th, but he played on Saturday. Lopez was in the 9th. Sebi took over for Yaz. There was a leadoff walk, and I was just thinking, here we go again with Lopez. But Luis Robert Jr., with an outfield assist, tracked down a fly ball, really didn't have to move too much. And then Cincinnati was taken off, and he doubled him up. Robert did. I mean, that was a tough decision by Cincinnati. I don't know where his mind was at. And then Lopez had a 101-mile-per-hour fastball to end it. This was what Grifol had to say on Robert after Friday's game. I can't stress this enough. Every time we talk about this, you're going to go through stretches like this. It just so happened that he went through this at the beginning of the season, but everybody goes through this at some point. It's 11 games. He's performed in the past. He's going to perform again. He's an extremely talented individual that can show off all 5 tools in one game at any time. On Friday, he was 1 for 4 in the game. He was hitting in the 6th spot on Friday, which I thought was interesting, but that was limited as he got moved around throughout the weekend. Elvis was 1 for 1 with 2 walks and that big 3-run home run. Sox offense on Friday, 5 runs, 7 hits, 1 for 3 with runners in scoring position. Lynn, 6 2/3, 8 hits, 4 earned runs, 0 walks, which was great. 8 strikeouts, good to see. Gave up that 1 home run. His ERA 6.86. He threw 103 pitches, man. He's been throwing a lot of pitches. Kelly and Lopez each pitched an inning out of the bullpen. Combined 0 hits, 1 walk, 4 strikeouts. This is with Andrus after Friday's game. Collectively as a team, everybody has started to relax, loosen it up. Very happy that April is gone and we can turn the page. I love it that way. Everybody has a brand new mindset coming to the ballpark and just getting ready for every series. So when you hear stuff like that, it makes me think back to that Dave Martinez quote about the Nationals. Just you got to have a short memory, focus on what's in front of you, and just kind of start putting some wins together. Sox manager Pedro Grifol has spent a lot of time over the years in a Kansas City Royals uniform. He leads the White Sox into Kauffman Stadium for a 4-game series starting on Monday. More on that in a moment. Sox in Kansas City, 4-game series. Sox were 9-10 against the Royals last season. Royals always play the Sox tough. I made a trip out to Kauffman Stadium, actually a couple times. It's been a while since my most recent trip, but I mean, you just don't see White Sox wins. I don't think I've seen the Sox win in maybe 6 games when I've gone out to Kauffman Stadium, which is a fun stadium. They've got that Royals Hall of Fame out in left field. It's worth your time. You're going to eat well, that's for sure, in Kansas City. But man, they just play the Sox so tough. Pedro Grifol's return. So what does he have up his sleeve for his old team? This was the write-up after Grifol was hired as the White Sox manager this past fall. Grifol had been with the Royals organization since 2013 and had served as a quality control coach, catching coach, and bench coach along the way. Grifol was on the Royals coaching staff for the organization's consecutive World Series appearances in 2014 and 2015, with the latter season, of course, culminating in a World Series victory. Skeptics of the hiring can perhaps point to the fact that Grifol was twice passed over as a managerial candidate by the Royals themselves. Though the first time around, it appeared as though Mike Matheny was always the clear heir apparent to Ned Yost upon the latter's retirement. This offseason, the Royals perhaps simply wanted a fresh voice from outside the organization after an ownership change in 2019. The dismissal of longtime president of baseball ops Dayton Moore and the aforementioned ousting of Matheny. The two clubs are also simply at different points in their competitive cycles and may thusly prefer different traits from their newly minted skippers. So Grifol knows his former team very, very well. It'll be interesting to see how he prepares the White Sox, how they are prepared to face the Royals. Dylan Cease against Zach Greinke on Monday. Cease not having a 2022 type of start, very difficult to repeat. Greinke having a very rough beginning, 1-4 with a 5.25 ERA. He has rocked the White Sox to sleep, though, in previous starts. Greinke is 10-10 with an ERA of 3.81, 166 strikeouts and 1 save in 31 appearances against the White Sox in his career. Last meeting was last August 11th in Kansas City, where he went 6 1/3 innings, gave up 9 hits, but 0 earned runs, 0 walks, and 5 strikeouts. He is not going to overpower you. He was going to mix things up. He's going to change locations and speeds and keep you off balance. I think this is a must-win series for the White Sox. I think every series here on out is a must-win series for the White Sox. Sox were 4-6 in Kansas City last year. Thank you so very much for making this podcast part of your daily routine. You can find the Locked On White Sox podcast wherever you find your podcasts. We're on Twitter at Locked On Sox. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Hey, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I appreciate if you pass that along to other White Sox fans in your life. Sox take on the Royals. Dylan Cease on the hill. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with Sirius XM and the SXM app. Search White Sox. Thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. Hey, everydayers, you know who you are. On the next episode, I will recap Dylan Cease's outing and hopefully be celebrating a White Sox winner. Appreciate you making time for the Locked On White Sox podcast. I'm Nick Morawski, and until next time, go Sox.